Hello, all. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a couple of weeks, isn't it, since the end of the F1 season, and the reason I haven't done any videos between now and then for my last stream was quite simply I've been infected with this virus that's been spreading the planet. Old COVID. COVID made its name in my household, where my wife and I and my 17-month-old son tested positive. So we are now recovered and all tested negative and all fine. But as you can imagine, I needed a little bit of time off to rest and recover and so on. But seem to be okay now. And I thought I'd do a stream today to cover. Basically, I haven't really been able to go through some of the stuff that's happened since then in terms of Mercedes. So we're going to the three topics we're going to talk about today is Mercedes deciding not to appeal, and how that links with what the FIA statement was and just before then. So also, there are talks about whether Hamilton will quit or not. We're going to talk about that. And also, we're going to have a little look at 2022. We're going to look at the race calendar for next year because there's some interesting races, 23 races all in all, with an extra long calendar. Whether or not that stays like that with COVID and whatnot, we don't know, but we'll go into that. And also, we're going to look at 10 changes to the Formula One cars for next year. The rule changes, obviously, big changes coming up. Designed to make racing more simple, overtaking easier, etc., etc., etc. So we'll go into that as well. I am joined by my brother Jordan to discuss all this. So yeah. Oh, actually, another point I probably should point out. The football fan zone is changing. Over the next 6 weeks, the football fan zone is going to have a name change to the Formula One fan zone. It's going to become or the F1 fan zone. It's going to become a solely based F1 channel, and it's going to be an F1 channel for fans. I've got a virtual studio set up. I can take people's calls and comments, and people can join me on the stream to chat about the Formula One, and it's all going to be ready in time for the first testing session in the back end of February. So stay with us for that, and the channel, like I said, will be specifically Formula One only. So hopefully, for those who follow me on here with the Formula One stuff that I've done, will appreciate that. And as always, if you do like the video at any time, don't forget to click the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Click the notification bell as well, so you are notified, one, when we do videos and they go out, and two, when we go on to live streams. So let's get started. Right, here he is, Jordan.
Hello.
It's well, we won't go too much into the season itself as a season review, but obviously the ending of the Formula One season was controversial, to say the least. And so I think the first thing we'll start with in terms of Mercedes dropping their protest. Now, anyone who's watched my previous streams will know about our thoughts, or particularly my thoughts, and a lot of thoughts about what has been, how the race finished in under such circumstances, controversial circumstances. Mercedes have dropped their protest. Jordan, is that the right thing to do?
I wouldn't have, but I'm quite malicious like that. I would have taken them all the way to the cleaners, especially if, like Toto Wolff says, he's convinced that the case is absolutely ironclad stonewall. I would have taken them to the cleaners.
Do you? Because there are reports that Hamilton was very persuasive and influential. Influential. I can't even say it. Hamilton had a big influence on Mercedes not going through with the protest. But given the FIA statements just the day before Mercedes announced that they were going to drop their protest, I would argue, and you can certainly put the two together, that the FIA have come out with their. We'll go. I mean, I've actually got the stuff written here actually in terms of what they have said. So they've said the circumstances surrounding the use of the safety car following the incident, driver Nicholas Latifi, and the related communications between the FIA race direction and race direction team and the Formula One teams have notably generated significant misunderstanding and reaction from Formula One teams, drivers, and fans. It is an argument that is currently tarnishing the image of the championship due to celebrations of the first Drivers' World Championship title won by Max Verstappen and the 8th consecutive Constructors' World Championship title won by Mercedes. Now, the first thing that springs to my mind is they're saying, well, we've all misunderstood what's happened. It was a simple misunderstanding about what happened.
What a load of bollocks. Do you know what I mean? What a load of bollocks. They at that point, that's the sort of statement where they're trying to cover their own asses, trying to tell us that it's not black, it's not white, but it's grey, even though we can see clearly otherwise. For me, Hamilton, I suspect, probably was or wanted this appeal to not happen, probably because he didn't want to be awarded a title under controversial circumstances like that.
Mhm.
And I suspect that he probably felt that from a reputational perspective, it will do more damage to go through that process. But Mercedes clearly pushed the FIA to make the statement that they made, accepting responsibility, launching an investigation, talking about the sport being tarnished and everything else, essentially saying that Max Verstappen is an illegitimate champion without saying he's an illegitimate champion.
It is. What I don't like is they're saying that we've all misunderstood what's happened.
Yeah, they're talking to us like we're stupid. We're not. There's no misunderstanding.
We've watched. I mean, you and I have watched Formula One now for the best part of 20 years.
Yeah, good 20 years or so.
And during that time, I've never seen a race finish under such controversial circumstances. Never mind a title deciding race.
Well, the reality is it was selected. They deliberately selected, or Michael Massey deliberately selected who was going to go past. He knew exactly what he was doing. You can't tell me that when he decided I'm going to select cars 1, 2, 3, and 4 to overtake and start their procedure to get to the back of the queue, having unlapped themselves, you can't tell me that he didn't know what he was doing.
The question I would say, and this is, I've never seen a safety car under safety car conditions where safety cars come in where only part of the field were able to unlap themselves. Either it's been
because it's never happened. It's never happened.
That's what I mean. And what the FIA is sort of saying, and certainly stewards have said, and the FIA haven't really given their opinion on it as such, is that, well, that's within the race director's discretion to do that. Just because he hasn't done it before doesn't mean he can't do it. It's in the rules that he can do it, and that's what they're sort of hinting at. However,
yeah, but what do you know? What I'll tell you what, that the comparison of that is Mike Dean deciding that he's not going to award a penalty to a team. Let's say, for example, Man United. He's decided throughout this entire 90 minutes, I'm not going to award Man United a penalty, no matter how blatant a foul it is. I'm going to selectively choose when a foul's a foul rather than go by the actual guidelines of when a foul's a foul.
See,
Do you see what I mean?
I would put a different analogy on it. I would say what Michael Massey did essentially was, because his whole concept or his whole method of way of thinking for that last lap, or certainly from what he said publicly and privately, was that he was trying to give the sport that last sort of lap race, and that was trying to make a race of it. I wanted to give the fans entertainment, etc., etc. But I would argue, and this is where I would use an analogy, I would say that's a bit like a referee giving a team a last-minute penalty just so it created entertainment, because it had been a dull 0-0 game. And it's, oh, well, we need something in this game, or I'm going to give a penalty even though it's at the wrong end.
It was even worse than that, because it was even worse than that, because it's like offering a penalty even though the penalty wasn't earned.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, is that, yeah, it wasn't earned. What I'm saying is that it was it's like the ball's in the halfway line. Oh God, this is a poor game. I can't deal with it. Oh, penalty to the team in the Reds. Just let's mix this up a bit, that's, to me, that's what it was like. To me, it was like, well, he was just trying to give a race, but it's not his job.
No,
Firstly, he is
they're basically
he's
saying that.
invested to referee. He's not there to create the entertainment. He's there to monitor the behavior of the teams and the drivers so that they all play within the rules of the game.
Well, he what they're saying is that he basically has the authority to make the rules up as he goes along, and that's
Well,
not what it's about. His job is to enforce the rules, not to write the rules.
I think where Mercedes would have had a very strong case if they'd gone to a court. Firstly, and for viewers watching, this is the difference between a sport, an insider sport battle, if you like, between the FIA and Mercedes, and what could have eventually been an independent judge at, let's say, CAS, for example, is that a judge at CAS makes their ruling purely on the legal grounds and legal basis without any sporting merit whatsoever. For example, they don't look and say, oh, well, it's the last lap of the race championship. They say, well, that lap is just as important as the first lap of the first race or the 15th lap in the 15th race, whatever. It's the same rules. The rules aren't any different just because it's the last lap of the last race. And the result of that should have no bearing on how the rules are implemented. A bit like in football terms, like a foul is a foul, whether it's in the box or outside the box. A foul under the legal terms, a foul outside the box and a foul inside the box. Some will say, "Oh, well, you need more of a foul inside the box," but actually, there's nothing in the rules that say, "Oh, well, that foul is a foul. That foul is a foul anywhere on the pitch unless it falls in the opposition penalty area, in which case it's not a penalty. It's not a foul, and therefore it's not a penalty." There's nothing within the rules that say that, so to speak. And so when a judge looks at these sort of instances, they're looking at it purely from a legal perspective rather than any sporting merit whatsoever. They don't look and say, "Oh, well, I won't say that because that might strip this person of the world championship and that might do that," and so on and so forth. They're purely looking at the legal wording and the way in which those rules are interpreted. Now, I would argue if it went to
But also, I'll tell you what else, Ben, as well. Also, they'll look at precedent from times before as well, right? So, for example,
we're making a decision, yes. We're making a decision.
So when the FIA say Michael Massey has overriding authority and therefore he makes the decision, right? Then the question becomes, okay, Michael, why did you make this decision? And if he says, well, because I wanted to allow a final lap to be taken place, right? Fine. But then Mercedes will point back to a previous incident before that we saw where Michael Massey didn't played a completely different set of rules under the exact same circumstances. You remember what GP it is? We're at a race. We're last few laps behind the safety car, and he had the choice to make, and his choice was to go by the context of the rules, right? And when he was questioned about why he's allowed that to happen, he's made it out. He said because that's what's in the rule book. He's changed his mind. He's decided for this particular race at this under this time, I'm going to do something completely different to what I've done before.
The thing I didn't like in particular about what Michael Massey did, like you say, it's if anything, it was, and I guess it sums up Michael Massey throughout the season, which is inconsistent. Not just with that decision, but inconsistent when you look at the Max Verstappen incident in Brazil, where we've had lesser push offs or shove off the roads. Norris, for example, got a penalty for doing that, exactly that on Perez in Austria, far less aggressive, and got a penalty, for example. And so a lot of people would argue that he has been pretty inconsistent. One race and I think that's one of the things that a lot of the drivers have said as well. A lot of drivers have said, particularly after that race, after what happened in Abu Dhabi, the likes of Norris and George Russell said, it's been unacceptable. Norris said, what the F is going on, and so on. What the FIA have actually, just to follow on what they were saying with the statement, they also said this matter will be discussed and addressed with all the teams and drivers to draw any lessons from the situation and clarify and clarity to be provided to the participants, media and fans about current regulations to preserve the competitive nature of our sport while ensuring the safety of drivers and officials. it's not only Formula One that may benefit from this analyst, but also generally the other FIA circuit championships. So they're saying that they're going to review what's going on and obviously make an analysis and make recommendations for future racing. There's one thing I'm absolutely confident will come in from next season, and that is I don't think the team principals or anyone from the team will be able to communicate with race directors going forward.
100%.
And I agree with that, because I think that's been far too. I think if people weren't able to speak to Michael Massey, I don't think he makes those same decisions again. I think he's been persuaded one way or another.
We hear about
was on the radio going, "Oh, it's all about letting them race. That's all about letting them race. That's all about letting them race." Well, if he doesn't get that in his ear, I think a penalty gets applied.
It's a number of things. I mean, even the media, the way the media have handled this, I think is totally wrong. For example, we've heard about Christian Horner a lot. About his communication with the race director, his constant bombarding of to Michael Massey, right? And we hear the media will say, like Brundle and Crofty will say that they're all doing it, that Horner's doing it, that Wolf is doing it, and yet I don't hear anything of Wolf doing it. Do you? We never hear of Wolf doing it, not to the extent at the very least, not to the extent at least that Horner does it.
So what Toto Wolff actually said regarding that system is he said that it's going on all the time. It's just that only very small snippets are actually played on TV, but it's going all the time. So Christian Horner actually said, not Christian Horner, sorry, Toto Wolff said there's so much going on the intercom that given fans a little bit of an overview adds to the dramas. Is the car breaking down? Are we having some kind of strategy discussion? Was meant, but I think we overshot. So basically, he's saying there, look, we're only seeing snippets. We're only seeing a very small number of things. But this is continuous. So throughout the race, continuous. I need to take myself by the nose. And Christian, we were given the opportunity to talk to the race director, directly, and because we fight so fiercely for the interests of our teams, all of us overstepped. This certainly was part of the failures this year, and under pressure from the team principals. Also, the race director's life wasn't made easy, so we need to come back. So again, I like I said, I think a lot of Massey's decisions were influenced, whether it be by Christian Horner or Toto Wolff, and certainly I think if he didn't have,
Ben, what I will say is how many decisions did Michael Massey make throughout the season that was clearly in benefit of Mercedes?
It's hard to say. I mean, you'd have to go back through. You could argue that the incident in Silverstone, that with a 5-second penalty, some will argue that was quite lenient, for example.
But that was consistent with situations in the past as well, though, Ben. So it wasn't really, was it?
Well, it's again. This is what I mean. We don't know what's been going on all the time. What's said? We know Toto Wolff was on the blower there at Abu Dhabi saying no safety car, etc., etc. So it's what I would say.
Yeah, but that's not what I said. That's not what I said. I said about when is it that Michael Massey's made the decision that has been in the clear benefit of Mercedes.
Well, we don't know because we don't hear all the all the conversation. What, for example, when Red Bull when Perez got a penalty to start the race at where was it at Saudi Arabia? Was it Saudi Arabia where he got the penalty? Was it Qatar where he started further down the grid because he didn't slow down through double yellow safety flags and whatnot. For we know,
that was Verstappen. That was Verstappen, and that was at Saudi Arabia.
Yes. So and what I'm saying is there we don't know if Toto Wolff's been on behind the scenes saying things there. We don't know if he's been saying, well, you can't do that. Hamilton done this and Hamilton's done that.
No, Ben. Ben, if you, it's quite simple. If you speed during the double yellows, then you've broken the rules. You should be punished. No, there's nothing that
Hamilton
Toto
done it.
Hold on. There's nothing that Toto Wolff can say, right? that is going to change the fact that the punishment that Max Verstappen got is the punishment he should have got because he sped through double yellow.
Also, Hamilton, don't forget, he also blocked off twice cars that were running one he wasn't running in practice. First, there was
in
Latifi.
Practice.
I think it was Latifi in practice,
right?
Where
But
Latifi had to bail out.
Okay, but then you could say, look at Brazil when he got relegated. His qualification got completely wiped out because of a fractional margin of illegitimacy with his rear wing, and yet he got massively punished for that, and yet Max Verstappen's pictured the day before with his hands all over it.
Well, yeah, no, I'm not saying. Yeah, I'm not saying this been thing. I'm not saying been thing. What I'm saying, John, you asked me a question, I've answered it. I'll also say on the Abu Dhabi when Lewis Hamilton was pushed off the corner, I would say pushed off in the first lap. And he joined the race, and he clearly joined much further down the track than what he was. You know, he'd gone from bloody 2 tenths ahead of Verstappen to 1.2, 1.3 seconds ahead of Verstappen, and nothing was done to bring bring that back round. I would have argued that Hamilton didn't. Yes, I don't think Hamilton. They were never going to make Hamilton give the place to Verstappen, but I certainly think that Hamilton, they could have made Hamilton drop back off so that he was only half a second quicker for half.
Yeah, maybe, but you're talking minor indiscretions, Ben, as opposed to big decisions like having your qualification lap completely wiped out, whilst your opponent is got his hands over your rear wing, and so therefore how can Michael Massey possibly say with absolute certainty that the reason of disqualification? The reason the rear wing didn't meet the criteria had nothing to do with Verstappen. You can't possibly say that because Verstappen's pictured with his hands all over it, and yet he gets a little fine. The point I'm making, Ben, is that the big decisions that happened this year that Michael Massey had to make, they went in favour of Red Bull. And when you see Christian Horner constantly on the blower to him all the time, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Because Wolf didn't get that sort of. The fact is, Wolf did not get that sort of favouritism.
Like I said, we don't know what's going. We've heard probably less than 1% of communications with Michael Massey throughout the race and so on and so forth. We just don't know what's going on. All I'm saying is, Toto Wolff himself has said that he has overstepped, as well as Christian Horner and so on. That's what I'm saying on the thing. I agree.
I'm sure that's the case. But I'm not going to get into.
I'm not getting into things for the previous races and so on and so forth. I'm just simply saying about with the Mercedes dropping their protest, with what the FIA have said about it and so on and so forth. And what a court might look at now. Judges are going to look and say, oh, well, yeah, Michael Massey's been this, that, and the other, and the naughty boy. They're not. They're going to look at that one specific incident, and they're going to look at whether, and certainly whether the rules are applied as they're intended. Now, I would argue, for example, where they point, or the FIA pointed to the fact that the discretion of the use of the safety car lies solely with Michael Massey. Now, I would argue a judge might look at that and say that that the intention of that rule wasn't that he has complete and utter control of when to use it. For example, he can't just go, well, this has been with 30 laps in. Well, it's been a bit of a crap race. I know, let's bunch them all together, release the safety car. He doesn't have that.
No, the idea is he has authority over the safety car. Yes, the rules are clear on that. He has authority over the safety car, but his authority over the safety car is still in line with the protocols.
Yeah.
So his authority, he can choose to bring in the safety car, but that still has to go through the protocols of doing so. So I'm going to choose. I'm Michael Massey. I'm deciding right now's a good time to bring in the safety car. Fine. Let's start the procedure of bringing in the safety car. That means A, all lapped cars unlap themselves, and B, the safety car shall return the following lap. Right? That's the protocol.
The thing is, this is where I think he would struggle, and this is why I think the Mercedes would have had a real strong case in a court, which is when Michael Massey said about But at the time of making that decision, the safety car in this lap light had already been flicked, and therefore teams had already been made aware, and the safety car had already been instructed that they were coming at the end of that lap, and so on and so forth. And they just didn't have enough time. We couldn't change it at that point. It's already that thing. I would argue that what he's saying is, well, I can't change my own rules there, but he had changed his rules to get himself into that situation in the first place. He had changed. So, and if that was the case, you could have red flagged the race earlier. He's saying, well, I couldn't red flag the race because the conditions didn't allow for red flag. But you
that's contradictory. That's contradictory to your claim that you have total authority, isn't it? Really?
Absolutely. Is it what I mean? These are contradictories in itself. And again, these are the sort of things that you would, if you're a Mercedes legal team, you would bring up in front of a judge who, again, is.
And this is exactly why I would have taken them to the cleaners. Yeah, well, we all know how obvious it was.
Yeah, the thing is, and this is the other thing, and another, well, again, one of the reasons I think they didn't take it on was because Hamilton, I think, was quite adamant that he didn't want that to be the case, and also had Mercedes have won, it wouldn't have necessarily meant that Lewis Hamilton, the title would be stripped from Verstappen or slap, and
no,
Hamilton is your crown.
CAS wouldn't have offered a remedy. They wouldn't have offered a remedy. They would have just said yes, the rules are broken. That's it.
And I don't think Hamilton would have wanted to be awarded the title under those circumstances by the FIA having to come and say, you'll have to pass us that trophy back. I hope you haven't done too much of it, Verstappen. We're going to have to get polished and cleaned and pass over Hamilton. It wouldn't have worked like that. It would have left the sport in a serious problem, serious legitimate problem in terms of legitimacy. So I think, and the more I look at it, the more I think, perhaps moving or perhaps using this to clarify things, and in my opinion, to get a new race director, which I think is needed. I think Michael Massey,
untenable his job is, absolutely, no doubt.
Yeah, he's lost the respect of the drivers and teams. Not all of them. I mean, the only people who don't respect him are Red Bull and AlphaTauri, who are sister teams, and their drivers. But everyone else, when you've got drivers sat there saying what the F has just happened and this is totally unacceptable, I don't think his authority is there anymore, and I think the FIA need to consider that when it comes to the start of next season, whether or not he needs. But I also think it needs to be more than one FIA race director. I think you need a panel of 3 race directors. So one, you're evening out the workload, because there's been lots of talks about Michael Massey being under too much stress with the amount of workload there is. Okay, you get a panel of 3. You split the workload, but also when it comes to making certain decisions, it can be based on a majority rather than a sole.
I disagree. The reason I disagree on this one, Ben, is because a lot of these decisions are made in real time and have to be made very quickly and sometimes very suddenly. And if the Russians launched a nuke at the United States aren't going to go, well, let's pull in a panel from Congress and decide what to do, right? Because by the time they've done that, the nuke's landed and they're all fucked.
Well, you can have a race director, and you can have 2 assistant race directors. You can have a race director has overriding authority, but you can have 2 assistant race directors who can review and pass on to stewards if need be, and so on and so forth.
I think you should have maybe a couple of assistant directors who can oversee investigations, for example. You don't need to make a decision instantly on whether to investigate someone. That's something you can do within a time frame. So I agree with that, but I just don't think there are certain things that have to be made in real time that you're not going to have time to discuss in a panel and vote on it. Right. Just very quickly, as for this investigation, the FIA investigation has to be transparent, and I think Mercedes will very quickly protest if the FIA don't thoroughly investigate. They have to investigate. They've said they're going to investigate. Now they're going to have to do that. But if they're not transparent about it, it's going to be even more damaging for them.
Well, the FIA did say the FIA will therefore do its utmost to have this in motion within Formula One governance and will propose to the Formula One Commission to give a clear mandate for study and proposal to the Sporting Advisory Committee with the support of Formula One drivers so that any identified meaningful feedback and conclusions be made before the beginning of the 2022 season. Now, that stuff does go into public knowledge. That does go into, it essentially goes into sport and regs. So I don't foresee any issues with certain things being made public. I also think Mercedes have probably insisted on it as part of their conditions.
I'd be absolutely amazed if they hadn't. I'd be amazed if they didn't.
Anyway, let's move on to the next topic, which is Hamilton to quit. Which I personally don't see that happening. I think a lot of it is dust settling and whatnot, and things can be said in the heat of the moment and whatnot. I still think he wants to go and try and win that 8th world title. Obviously, in terms of the cars next year, whether or not he'll have an opportunity to do that, we can discuss on the next topic on the 2022 preview. But what do you think, first of all? Do you think Hamilton, do you think it realistically he will quit?
I think it's a possibility. The reason I think it's a possibility, I think that there's no doubt he's hurting. He's hurting a lot, and he's hurting because this wasn't just a world title. This was a record-breaking world title, a title that would have had him as the most successful driver in the history of Formula One. And with the new regulations and the new cars coming next season, there are some big questions as to how dominant Mercedes will be going forward. Hamilton may well feel he'll know more than we do about what those cars are going to be like next season and where Mercedes are going to fit into that. And if he's already, if it's genuinely contemplating quitting, then that already says to me that perhaps there isn't a huge amount of confidence in the Mercedes car next year.
The thing is, normally these, even with the new regs for next year, these races tend to be won by the teams with the biggest budgets, of which Mercedes still have one of, if not the biggest budget. So I still think Mercedes are going to be up there. The question is how much competitive are other teams to Mercedes, in my opinion.
But then look, Ferrari have had a massive budget, and they haven't won a constructors title in how many years?
Well, no, of course. Well, that's because they've had an engine that they made
the point
competitive, but against the rules.
They've not in the hybrid era. They've not properly challenged in the hybrid era.
Well, they had a spell with Verstappen, not Verstappen, with Vettel, and then if you remember, partway through that season,
and an illegal engine,
the legal engine, and there was clear something they didn't know. We still to this day don't know what it was, but they obviously got told to take it off, whatever it was, and it massively hurt them, and they've struggled to recover since. But they were creeping back up last season, or the season just gone. And again, next season is going to be less about engine power. We'll go into the in fact, let's move on to that because into the F1 2022 preview. So I'm just going to bring up my screen here, and we can have a look. Firstly, we'll look at the races. Let's just okay, yeah. Bear me 2 seconds. Right, so this is the race calendar, starting in Bahrain and then of course Saudi Arabia, which is a lot earlier this year in March, 25th to 27th of March, and Australia, well, return Grand Prix. We haven't seen for a couple of years. Australia, obviously Miami. That's an interesting one. Just very quickly, John, what Grand Prix are you looking for the most for next season? There's a few.
Canada. There's always one of my favourites, Canada. All the champions. It's fast, exciting. It's not too long, so there's plenty of laps in it. Always
there's a couple of unknowns here. Firstly, I think the Miami. Now, street racing tends to be a bit. There's only one street race I really enjoy watching these days, and that's Azerbaijan. Probably one of the best races on the calendar.
The thing with street races is that they can be hard to overtake on because you've got walls, you've got barriers on each side, you haven't got runoff areas. It's a lot more dangerous if you make a mistake. But having said that, Saudi Arabia street race, absolutely phenomenal, wasn't it? Phenomenal.
There's certainly when they're looking at choosing or designing these street circuits, particularly the new ones, they are clearly taken into consideration. I mean, certainly like Monaco, for example, it's just a
It's a crap
glorified
race.
formation lap. Yeah, it's
a crap race.
The prestige of it is good, obviously, but it's a glorified formation lap now. It's not really, it just doesn't work for me as a race anymore. But so when it comes to Miami, you would assume they've taken consideration into how easy cars can overtake. And to be perfectly honest, the new design of the cars is supposed to make it more overtaking friendly next season.
But I mean, Pirelli tires. They say that every season they say that their tires are meant to be better for this reason and for that reason. It never really is it? So we'll never really know about that.
No, well, there's not the tires, but there's new regulations, the new rules for next season. So, for example, they're going to be on 18-inch wheels with a lower profile, which means there's going to be less rubber between the rim and the edge of the tire. And of course, there's a whole bunch of technical changes to the car to take off the downforce. And I'll show you, we'll go into those in a second, but just having a look at some of the other races to look forward to. Belgium, we never really got to see a race this year because of the rain.
Real shame that.
Yeah, Belgium's always been a good race. Singapore, we didn't have this year because of COVID. That was cancelled. Australia was another one. Japan was another one that we didn't get to see this year. Mexico, we saw. Hungary, we saw these. Mostly a lot of European. We didn't see Canada this year either, actually, did we? So there's.
Can you remind me, Ben? Is Turkey in the calendar next year?
It's not, and nor is Qatar. The reason why Qatar isn't in there,
they come in the year after, don't they?
World Cup. Well, yeah, but that's because it's World Cup in Qatar.
Yeah.
So they're focusing Qatar is going to be on the World Cup rather than the Formula One. And Turkey isn't in there, and I think Turkey filled in, didn't it? And nor did Portugal.
They did.
Things. Nor is Portugal. But that's because obviously you had and they tried to keep a lot of the racing to Europe, didn't they? So they had, for example, there was
a number of races at the same circuits, weren't there? I mean, Austria had two different races in the same.
Yeah.
Well, I think that might have been the same country rather than the same circuit, but Silverstone had a couple of races.
Yeah.
Just trying to fill out the calendar, really, weren't they?
Yeah. So, but one of the things now, if you look on here, this is the designs for the Formula One car for next season. Now, my first thoughts are that looks more like an F2 car than an F1 car. But there's some notable things. So first one, this is on the Formula One website one. This is the 10 things to know about next year's car. It's been designed specifically to promote better racing. So again, this will obviously be with. So I think one of the things that's been a major problem this year, particularly at circuits where you have fast corners and whatnot, is being able to be close to someone. So, and when you've got a circuit where you've got a fast final corner before the long straight, the long straight just didn't really give anyone any opportunities to overtake because the fast corner, they couldn't follow close enough to then be in with an opportunity in the slipstream and so on and so forth going down the long straight. The slow corners you were okay with, but you couldn't if you were going around a fast corner. And that's because of the amount of dirty, hot air that come off the back of these cars made it very difficult to follow closely behind. The new car for next season is supposed to be much more friendly at allowing you to follow closely. So that should allow on the faster corners, in particular before a straight, that cars will be able to get closer on the fast corner and give themselves an opportunity down the straight, especially when you've got DRS and so on. 2, the car will feature over-wheel winglets for the first time and wheel covers are back. So over-wheel winglets, and you can actually see the covers there as well. So apparently, it says 2 of the striking feature of the 2022 car, it's over-wheel winglets and return to a feature last seen in F1 in 2009, which wheel covers. The inclusion of the latter simple, sending airflow through the wheels might be an enormously potent way for teams to increase their downforce, but it also adds to the chaotic aerodynamic weight coming off the cars. So presumably this is going to change the way in which the air flows, and it's going to mean there's going to be less dirty air coming off the back. Number 3, the cars will feature 18-inch wheels with low-profile tires for the first time. So that's another interesting. Look at that. Do you not look at that car and think it looks like an F2 car more than an F1 car? Certainly the way we're used to seeing it.
A little bit. But I bet you the performance is not the same as an F2 car.
Well, as long as it's quicker. I mean, they're not gonna be as fast as they finished this season. And bear in mind, they finished the season having been on those regulations for the last 7-8 years. No, was it?
It's the same every time. It's the same every time you have major regulation changes, isn't it? The car almost resets. So over the years, over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that car will get faster and faster and faster as the teams understand
they learn
better.
more and progress. Exactly. And we've had 8 years now, have we, of the current hybrid era?
Yeah, it's got to be pushing that, isn't it?
Well, of course, and yeah, and if you remember, before that hybrid era, where were Mercedes? They weren't top. They were 4th best team, maybe, behind Ferrari, Red Bull, and McLaren. And then, of course, the hybrid era come in, and it was all about the Mercedes engine because it was dominated then by Mercedes-powered teams. Mercedes obviously
engine was a massive factor in the last regulations, a massive factor. Whereas before, downforce played a bigger role, and that's where you saw the likes of Red Bull dominating.
Of course, yes, and Mercedes challenged them, I thought, but the problem they had with I think was Hamilton and Jenson Button. They didn't. Red Bull focused all their eggs in one basket, and that was Vettel. McLaren refused to sort of get drawn into a number 1, number 2, and so therefore, if they didn't really back one of the drivers, and I think that was the difference really with them. But certainly when the new race regulations come in, and certainly, I mean, the last couple of years, it's not been so much as engine power because other engines have gotten better. We've seen McLaren under Renault improve, and Honda obviously powered Red Bull and so on. And they might not have had the same engine power.
Of course, they've left now, haven't they, Honda?
Sorry, of course,
Honda have left now.
Yeah, they have left. But my point is that Mercedes-powered cars weren't dominating the field like they were in the first couple of yees. In the first couple of years, Bottas made his name at Williams in a Williams Mercedes-powered car, and Force India at the time were also right up there as well because all these cars that were Mercedes-powered were dominating the races in those first couple of years. We've got a rule reset, and that rule reset basically throws everything back into everyone starting on a level pegging. And so that's why I think, and as we go back to with Hamilton, whether or not he would quit, he would be looking at how competitive the Mercedes car could be because there is no guarantee Mercedes are going to be the front runner next year because you don't know how much. I mean, McLaren have faded off badly in the second half of the season. I would argue they put a lot of their.
We already know they started the process a couple of years back, or getting ready for this one. They've put a lot of their resources into this the next year's car.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a big year for McLaren next year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They've got an excellent young driver in Lando Norris.
Ricciardo, disappointing season for him, by the way.
His first season at Renault wasn't it? And he sort of come much more to life in the second season at Renault.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to see.
Yeah, he seems to have, ever since he left Red Bull, and the form that he once had.
Hi, Lucas. Hope you're doing okay, mate. It certainly yes. I would, yeah. I mean, but he struggled behind Hulkenberg, didn't he, at Red Bull? At Renault. But then the second season, he was a lot better. And I think his experience is obviously invaluable. Renault certainly didn't want to lose him based on what I've seen on things like on the Netflix program. All right, next one. The front wing and nose concept have been completely rethought. So although the front wings have been getting progressively simpler in recent seasons, the 2022 F1 car will feature a totally new front wing shape. Keeping with philosophy of 2022 car, the new front wing's job is to both generate consistent downforce when running closely behind another car and ensure that the front wheel brake is well controlled and directed down the car in the least disruptive way. So, in other words, you're supposed to be able to it's supposed to the best way to put it, it's supposed to move the. Oh, John, you still there? I think we've slight technical difficulty. I'm sure he'll be back on. And I'll just sort of carry on going while I was there. The idea of this is to allow cars to be able to move closer because the front wing is essentially where the air hits the front of the car. It's the front wing that first dictates where that air is going, whether it's going around the sides, over the top, underneath, etc., etc. Everything is that front wing is the first point of which you can dictate. And I think Jordan's back here. Technical difficulties, Jordan.
I fucking dropped my phone.
So that front wing is the first point where teams can manipulate the airflow. It's the first point where the air hits the car. And so it's quite an important aspect of the car these days, a lot more important than what it used to be many years ago. And remember the old flat, like one sort of panel front wing. And now you've got all these different shapes and features on it and so on, and the end plates, and it's all
Same with the nose, by the way, Ben. Same with the nose as well.
And the nose as well. The nose, as you can see now, the nose. I remember a few years ago. I remember on the BBC chat thing, they all the cars had their own design of a front nose. And they were comparing them all to all different types of animals. And the noses of an animal, like an anteater, for example, with its massive bloody hole. But that was, I think, Ferrari. They can compare that nose to an anteater. This one looks a lot more simple, looks more flat, and it's actually part of the changes.
Is it me? Or does that look wider?
Might be the 18-inch wheels that make it look a bit wider. An aero feature from the 70s is back, sort of. F1's motorsport teams began work on 2022 car back in 2017, and it soon became apparent the key change required to ensure closer racing would be replacing the aerodynamic emphasis on ground effects to create downforce. Ground effects came into prominence in the F1 in the late 1970s with cars effectively designed in the shape of upside-down airplane wings, creating huge amounts of downforce as they were pushed into the track, which presumably that's what they're looking at when you look at the front wings. You can see these massive end plates that come up halfway up the bloody wheel of the car. So I can see what they're saying that. Plus, when you look at the wheel covers as well. The rear wing features new rolled tips. So it's from behind. It's that rather beautiful Art Deco looking rear wing on 2022 car. And automotive style has contributed to the aspect of 22 cars' overall look, incidentally, actually has an improved function, and it's to do with mushrooms. Let's explain. While current cars' rear wings direct airflows upwards, they're also designed to then flow outwards, leaving the dirty air sitting there for the following car to drive through. By contrast, the shape and position of the 2022 car's rear wing creates rotational airflow that collects the rear wheel brake and rolls into the flow, exiting the diffuser, forming an invisible mushroom-shaped wake. This narrower wake is then thrown thanks to a steeper diffuser ramp higher into the air. So in other words, it's trying to take that dirty air from right behind the car and where the other car drives into and shifting it upwards so that the car behind, the nose of the car, the front wing of the car isn't hitting that dirty air. It's cleaner air because the dirty air is sitting higher up. Presumably that's what they're trying. And, again, a lot of this is trial and error, but presumably that's what they're trying to do. It will use the same power units as 2021. So same power units, interestingly. Which we know obviously the likes of McLaren will be using Mercedes and Mercedes will be using Mercedes and so on. I don't think there's actually any changes in terms of the grids, in terms of their engine changes, apart from the only difference is the Honda powered cars, Red Bull and AlphaTauri, will continue to use Honda powered engines, but they won't be Honda engines. They'll be tagged. I think they'll be sponsored tags. So I think Red Bull have taken those engines and they basically essentially bought the manufacturing of those engines, and they will run them themselves and probably put some sort of sponsor in, like they have done, like Tag Heuer or something like that, or I think Aston Martin they've used as well, haven't they, over the last couple of years, Red Bull. Cars will run more sustainable fuel. Current regulations see cars running fuel containing 5.75% bio components. And while everyone is still working hard to introduce fully sustainable fuel in the near future, 2022 will see the bio component rates rise to 10%. That will be achieved through a move to E10 fuel. E standing for ethanol, while 10 refers to the percentage in the mixture. So make of that what you will. That means, presumably, they'll be able to use less fuel, presumably, if it's more efficient.
Well, it also means that the cars will be lighter.
Well, that's what I mean. Yes, if you can use less fuel, that's what I was sort of
and
trying to
solid
move
fuel,
towards.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like having solid fuel.
Which, you know, I've always, I mean, I would personally, and I've said this for several years, I'd be quite happy to go back to refueling, because apart from the cars being smaller and therefore lighter and quicker and much, you know, better, in my opinion, for racing, it also throws strategy into different strategies, because some teams will be fueling for longer, some will be fueling for shorter, etc., etc. It throws strategy into the air, and then you don't know what strategies teams are racing until they've done their final pit stop, if you know what I mean.
Perhaps, but then with the new fuel, I'm not sure how easy it is to refuel in a speedy manner.
Well, this is. I mean, this was my thing of sort of 2 or 3 years ago. We'd have to see how, as the quality of the fuel gets better, whether or not that makes a change to how much they can use, and whether it does indeed make the cars lighter, and so on. Safety car has been the forefront of design, or safety has been the forefront of design. It almost goes without saying that the new generation of Formula One cars come with the opportunity to make the sport even safer, and it's certainly the case with the 2022 car. The chassis now being able to store 48% and 15% more energy, respectively, in the front and rear impact tests. So again, they've obviously looked at how these cars crash, and presumably. I mean, I would say that the Formula One cars are as safe as they've ever been at this moment in time, and they'll be even safer next year. Number 10,
the Halo's been huge, a huge success, no doubt about it.
I agree. I think a lot of people weren't sure how they were going to look on a Formula One car, but I think that I almost struggle to see a Formula One car without it now, because we've become used to the image, haven't we?
Yeah, it took a couple of weeks, and it took a little while to get used to the sight of it. And I suppose the same would have been said with the drivers having to drive in it as well. But there's absolutely no doubt about it. It clearly works and is effective. And I think at this point, it's just absolutely normal now for drivers, for fans to look at it. Yeah, I think it's a big success. I really do.
I'm quite happy with and we've already seen it probably save lives. It probably saved Roman Grosjean's life when at Abu Dhabi, when he went through the barriers.
Italy,
yes. When
Verstappen went over the top, yeah.
And also Abu Dhabi, the same year after Roman Grosjean, you had the Racing Point tip over onto its back as well, didn't it? And the halo was there protecting the driver. So it's been, I think, a huge success already. I think it showed the need for it. Last point on this: the 2022 car has been put through over 7,500 simulations to get to this point. So everyone is nothing if not a thorough sport, and as you can imagine, creating the 22 cars not being a finger in the air exercise. Instead, everyone's motorsports have run approximately 7,500 simulations, creating around half a petabyte of data. That's the equivalent of a third of 10 billion photos on Facebook, or 10 million 4-drawer filing cabinets full of text documents, which is interesting. The jury's still out for me on whether it's going to change. I think that the FIA needed to make sure they got these new set of rules right, because they don't want these to then fail, and then in a couple of years' time having to change it all again, especially when you're trying to cut costs on F1. You can't cut costs and then say, "Oh, we're going to have to redesign the rules and regulations with the cars every
bearing
2 or
in
3
mind
years."
as well, Ben. Bearing in mind as well that these regulations have been brought in a year later than originally scheduled.
Yes, but
Because
that's
of
because of
COVID.
COVID. Yes, and
And
it's
so,
therefore,
but the point is that's given them an extra year to get it right.
yes, yeah,
So there's
of
no
course, yes,
excuses.
and I think they've learnt a lot more over the last, certainly over the last 2 years. I think they've learnt a lot more around how following a car with dirty air and how that dirty air is created and so on and so forth. And they've clearly made these cars, or the aspect on these cars are clearly to move that dirty air and allow the car behind closer following. And like I said, in particular, because you go to some tracks where you got really fast corners, and it's all well and good having a 2 kilometer straight. You can have a 2 kilometer straight, and with DRS and whatnot, it should be easy to overtake. But if you're having to start that straight a lot further back because you can't get close enough because the bend into that straight is a fast bend, and the dirty air means you can't get on its tail and give yourself a chance down the straight, then what's the point? You can have a 10 kilometer straight, it won't make any bit of difference. Especially with some of these cars, Mercedes powered cars, a non-Mercedes powered car is not going to outrun a Mercedes powered car unless you've got better traction out of the corner, out of that final bend to get in its slipstream with DRS. So I will be interested to see how that really affects. I tell you where races where I'm going to be interested, where I think that will really be put to the test and we'll really learn more. Silverstone, which is a very fast track with fast corners. Spa will be another one. Looking at this, actually, let's go back to the schedule for next year. We go to the schedule for. There we go. Bahrain will tell us some stuff, I guess, in terms of overtaking. Bahrain's not exactly an unfriendly place to overtake. Normally,
its final straight is a long one, isn't it? To be fair, it's a long one.
Yeah, it's not the things. It's not just the length of the straight. It's about that corner going into the final straight. You want a nice slow corner where teams can get close to the car in front, and it's got a relatively modest corner Bahrain. Plus, also the first corner, the first bend's a heavy braking zone. So again, it's about being able to brake late and cutting that inside line. Saudi Arabia, we've just seen. I thought that was a good race. I'm expecting to see plenty of overtaking there, if I'm being honest. Australia is another one where you don't see a lot of overtaking these days. You used to get loads years ago under the old rules.
One of the biggest things, Ben, when it comes to overtaking is how wide the track is. And Australia's track isn't particularly wide. And so there's very little room to overtake because when you go side wheel to wheel with another driver, you tend to find that you've got the driver's wheel touching you on your one side and you've got the end of the road on the other side.
In theory, where we should see the new designs of the car, where we should see more overtaking. Now, the problem now in Australia, the one thing you have to remember is that this pit straight isn't a massive straight. And the corner going into it's a relatively modest sort of medium speed corner and going into that straight. But the corner before that, the second from last corner, is a very sharp, just before you go to the pits, a very sharp left before it breaks round to the right and up the pit straight. So normally you needed to make sure you're close enough on that second last bend, just before the pits, before the pit entry, so that you're able to follow close enough round the final bend and give yourself a toe up the straight where you don't have a particularly long straight. What I'm expecting to see with these new rules is on that last corner that you can be a lot closer. You can follow a lot closer, and therefore you'll be starting the pit straight a lot closer. With DRS, should be able to give people a better opportunity, at least getting into that before that first corner. Italy, which is quite early this year. Normally, Spain's the first race in Europe, and it's Italy this year. Next year is in April. Now, Italy is normally was that Monza? No, it's not Monza, is it? Yeah. Hang on, let's have a look. So yeah, Monza. So you got a second Italian Grand Prix. So you got two in Italy next year, which will be interesting. As you can see, Monza. You got Monza instead. I was going to say because Monza is normally late in the year. It's normally September, and then we've got a different track for Italy. Miami, I'm looking forward to, just because one, I've been to Miami and I think it's a great place, and it'll be interesting to see how the street races. It's going to be quite glamorous, Miami. It'll be a glamorous Grand Prix. I just hope it's. I just hope the design of the race is going to leave enough for overtaking and for spectacle, rather than just a glitzy. It's Miami. It's we all know what like, but it's like Monaco, isn't it? It's like Monaco of the in terms of it's a prestige place to have a race. Spain and again, Spain is normally thrown up good races. I don't know if they're doing testing in Spain this year. They've done testing in. They've been the last few times they've done testing. They've done them in the hot weather, haven't they? In Bahrain, for example. Monaco will be Monaco. I don't expect much to go there. Azerbaijan, a street circuit straight after Monaco. You couldn't have, by the way, two completely opposite types of races in Monaco to Azerbaijan, literally next to each other, 2 weeks apart. Canada, followed by Great Britain. That's normally standard there. Looking forward to Canada. We haven't seen it for a couple of years because of COVID. Silverstone is Silverstone. We all know Silverstone's a very fast circuit. Austria, France, and Hungary. Out of those, Hungary's my worst one, I think. I've never been particularly. I find Hungary a bit too. What's the word? It doesn't. I think Formula One's outgrown the length of the Hungary track.
That not only that, but these new regulations, reducing the downforce and whatnot, is going to make Hungary, I think, an even worse race than it has been.
Well, it's either that or it's going to be better racing because of the way the cars are designed and so on and so forth. But
it's going to be harder to get around. There's no real big straights on Hungary, so it's going to be harder for cars to get around the corners.
But you'll be able to follow them. You'll be able to follow the car in front of you closely. That's the point, isn't it? That's what they're trying to say. Is you can follow on the corners.
You're never going to get a straight long enough, Ben, to force or to make big overtakes. The only way you're going to be able to do the overtakes is round the bends, and often you're going to have to go around the outside. And it's a rare move. It's something we don't see. We only see the best drivers do.
Well, turn the end of turn one, isn't it? The end of the pit straight is normally the place where overtakes, where Hamilton overtook Verstappen last year when he won that race. Belgium. It's always quick. Again, the weather there. I thought they should have made an effort to get that race raced on a Monday. By the way, I didn't agree with them awarding the high points as easy.
That's just another highly controversial decision by Michael Massey. Highly controversial.
The Netherlands, I didn't think much of the track. It might be better with these new cars. I think a lot of these races will look different with these new designs and whatnot. I weren't a massive fan. The one corner I did like was the one with a really steep bank. Was it turn 6 or something? That really steep bank. But apart from that, I didn't think a great deal of it, if I'm being honest. Italy, Monza, that'll be a very fast track. That's always, Monza's Monza, isn't it? Russia, but it's back again. Singapore, we haven't seen Singapore for a couple of years. Singapore, it's an endurance race, if any I've seen. It's the longest race on a calendar. Whether these new designed cars will improve the racing there or not, I don't know. Japan is going to be an interesting one as well, because again, we haven't been there for a couple of years now. United States Grand Prix. I actually quite like the US Grand Prix circuit personally.
I do.
I like the turn 1 into turn 2, or turn 1, or sort of pit straight into turn 1. The long straight up the hill and then a sharp turn to the left. I think we get plenty of overtaking there. The question is from there, because normally what's happened is the second straight or second longest straight, you obviously have a windy sector 1. And then it's chasing down sector 2. If you remember, was it this year? Was it last year where Verstappen held off Hamilton, and Hamilton just wasn't able to get close enough? And the big thing was it can get close enough down that straight, because going into that straight, not the main pit straight, but the other long straight there, you couldn't get close enough because through turn it would get big right behind Verstappen on turn one, but all that zigzagging in sector one with the dirty air, you just couldn't stay close. So you end up dropping back by half a second or so, and then by the time you get to the next straight, you're further behind them where you were at the end of the pit straight, if you see what I mean. And that I think is where the new design of the car should allow you to follow closer without that dirty air, so you'll be closer when you get to the second straight. In theory, again, this is in theory. Mexico, it's been a couple of been a few years now. Mexico, I quite like Mexico as a Grand Prix. Brazil, I think, is one of the best racing tracks on the calendar at the moment, or certainly was under the new regulations. Lots of overtaking going on at Brazil, and of course Abu Dhabi. What did you make of Abu Dhabi with the new layout this year?
I didn't prefer. I preferred the older layout.
Did you? You didn't think the new layout promoted more overtaking?
The thing is, the older layout had a massive straight. I actually thought overtaking, and to be totally honest, I'm not the only person who thinks this as well. Overtaking certainly seemed to feel like there was less opportunity for overtaking, but that could be down to the fact that we're having this issue with dirty air.
I was going to say when they redesigned this Abu Dhabi track, I would have thought they would have designed it with the new regulations in mind rather than 1 year of these older ones.
Bring in mind that it was meant to be raced under new regulations this year, so that's probably the case. It's like you say, it's meant to be a more overtaking friendly track. It certainly didn't turn out to be the case this year, but like you say, there was, when they designed this track, they designed it with the idea that this year just gone was meant to be under new regulations.
You would certainly think so. You would certainly think so. So that is that's a look at the 2022 season preview. Just to summarize then, certainly with the 2022 preview, I think it's all to play for next season. I think I don't even think testing will know a great deal, to be honest. You get a rough idea of testing, which we'll get in February, but
testing speed. Anyone who looks at speed in testing don't know what they're talking about. It's all about the laps. How many laps do these cars get in? Because reliability has always proven to be a greater indicator of how cars will do.
The thing is, they're using this year's engines, and this year's engines, I would argue, have probably been the most reliable that I can remember. How many engine failures did we see over the course of the season? The only times teams have had to change engine is when someone's crashed and they've had to change the engine because someone's crashed, as opposed to just an engine failure or power failure, a CPU failure.
I think a lot of it will come down to, as always, you got to look at how many laps have been completed by the teams. When you're getting teams getting 100, 120 laps in over a practice session, then you've got to say, well, that's good, very, very good progress. And even if those laps were the slowest times on the track, they will still feel like it was a job better done than someone who got the fastest lap on the track but only done 25 laps.
I think another scale people will use, certainly teams will be using, is how their times compared to last year in testing. They're going to be slower. But they'll have a rough idea of where they want to be in terms of how much slower. Are we expecting them? Is a team going there thinking, if we're 3 seconds slower, it means we're quick. If we're 4 seconds slower, it means we're not quick. They'll have a rough idea. Teams, they'll have a rough idea of what a good lap will be with the new rules, particularly the FIA.
So look at things like how's the car going to affect tire degradation, for example. How is the fuel being burnt? Are they burning it too quickly? Are they burning it not quick enough? So there's going to be a lot of data that they're going to have to bring in that they've not had to do so much over the last few seasons, but because of the major regulation changes, that they are going to be driving, despite the fact that they've got an engine that is the same as has been for the last several years. there's still going to be so many unknowns that this is one of those. It's one of those once a decade practices, isn't it? Really, once in a decade.
It's the one thing I'll be there's obviously with the tire degradation and so on. I don't expect. I mean, I'm expecting teams to get a lot of laps in because they are using engines that are extremely reliable now. Extremely reliable. I'm more intrigued to see. Firstly, I think the things what we don't know and what these cars have been designed for specifically is to be able to race and to follow closely with the car behind. We will not see that in testing. They're not racing in testing, so we won't see how well a car follows behind. But what I will be interested in, I'm sure there will be one or two teams that turn up with something on their car which everyone else at the paddock.
About to say innovation. There are one or two teams always turn up with some sort of innovation that the other teams haven't thought of, or they've been able to bend the rule to the point where they've been able to give themselves some sort of advantage. I don't know what team's going to do that next season, but those things will be the key tells here, I think.
The thing is, I think there's a lot more limited. You're limited. I mean, certainly if you're Red Bull or you're Mercedes, McLaren, one of the things where a lot of the big teams have always certainly learned to develop over the last few years, in particular, is that front wing. And as we've seen this season, just gone, a big emphasis was on the rear wing. FYI. Hi, Nesta. I hope you're doing well. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that, but okay. The rear wing was obviously a big A. Say again.
For information.
Oh, well, no, but I don't know what Faye was, but just lost my train of thought. So one of the things that obviously Mercedes and Red Bull focused a lot on this season was the rear wing, and obviously trying to get movement in that rear wing in order to reduce drag and so on and so forth. It's obviously been a clear thing of which the teams have learnt to play with over the years on these current regulations. That rear wing and front wing, the new regulations basically give a much more clearer sort of the rear wing and the front wing have to be these regulations, and the regulations leave little room for maneuver. We're playing around with the rear wing and the front wing. Where I think they'll be looking at around the wheels, because with the wheel covers and how that affects the downforce, and whether they, it could be the design of the wheel covers, for example. And top of my head here, we're going with, it's almost like, perhaps one of them goes with a more square-shaped cover than a circular-shaped cover, or perhaps the height or the length or the thickness or whatever. These are all things I think they'll be looking at, because they're less specific about those designs, and
what
also
I think,
things like the floor.
I think that where they'll look for is, rather than a boost in engine speed or should we say in straight line speed, they're going to look for some kind of innovative booster to downforce, because downforce is going to be there's going to be less of it in these new cars. So that's what we know. If they're going to look for some sort of innovative design, that's what we're going to look at.
Yes, but my point is, where on the car do you put that? Because we know they're very limited to what they can do in the front wing. They're very limited to what they can do in their rear wing, and really, it's going to be
the car. Quite likely underneath the car.
Hi, Rob. Hope you're doing all right, mate. Good to see you too, mate. Good to see you. Long time no speak, by the way. It will be. I think the floor. There'll be areas around the floor. I think they'll be looking at the side pods. They're the sort of areas where there's less said in the regulations about what you can or cannot do.
You want to, by going underneath the car, you're also being able to hide it from other teams.
Well, I mean that's a given. Yeah, I mean a lot of teams have done a lot of work on floors over the last few years, and I think that will continue. Whether Mercedes will continue to try and ramp up the power on that engine as well. I would certainly I would favour having a Mercedes power engine in that car at the moment. I think I still think Ferrari are down on power when you look at not just where Ferrari were, but where Ferrari powered teams were, like Haas, for
They have
example.
improved. There's no doubt they have improved.
But are they? But is that down the engine or is that down to the car design? Because their
In terms of
engines,
straight line speed, they have improved. They haven't improved as much as they probably should have, but they've definitely improved. Um, but I do think they are still streets behind Mercedes in that respect.
I think I will be interested to see whether the set of rule changes, whether they'll move onto a different type of engine during these current rule regulations, because these regulations are more about the specifics within the downforce of the car rather than the engine, because we know they're using the 2021 engine. I just wonder if this is if at the end of this season they'll start looking at, okay, we're going to start integrating a different type of engine, perhaps go back to a V8 or whether they're going to continue with a V6 hybrid, whether they're going to, just what I mean. I at some point I think
I
now.
don't think they'll go back. I do not think they'll go back to a conventional engine at this point. I think with the technology that's about these days, they're not going to. I think they'll look at it as a step backwards rather than a step forwards if they go back to a conventional. So they'll look at. I think that what you're more likely to see is them go more towards electric.
Well, no, because that'll be Formula E then, wouldn't it? And I don't think they'll.
I didn't say 100%. I said more towards electric.
I think they'll again. They could focus on or what was KERS or ERS or now it's power units, and how that power units potentially. I mean, I and also I think with the terms of the fuel, I think that will be a big factor over the next few years. Will be the type of fuel, and how much is able to be recycled. Well, not recycled, but obviously, if you can burn off less fuel, then you use less fuel. Less fuel in the car means lighter cars, better racing, greener cars as well. So
And you have to bear in mind, Ben, that Formula One always tries to go a few years ahead of what we see in the roads. So you go back sort of 8 years ago when hybrid was starting in Formula One. You wouldn't see hybrid on the roads. The whole point is, for the FIA they like to have their cars be the first thing to take on the new road technology.
new road
So,
yeah, but to an
so
extent,
when
however,
they
the
when
new
they
road
bought in, when
technology
they
is
bought in
going electric,
hybrid,
isn't it?
but when they bought in hybrid, there wasn't hybrid on the road. There were very, very, very few hybrid on the road. But now any car that's made is hybrid, right? So what you'll see is the next engines or the next road they go down regarding that sort of thing is the sort of next thing you're going to see on the roads
We
in
know what the
five,
next thing
six,
you're going to
7 years
see on the
time.
road. That is electric. That's it. There's going to be only electric
Oh,
cars in 15,
well,
20
I
years
think
time.
no. I think before we get to the point where it's just electric, you're probably going to start seeing situations where you're going to have different types of fuel, for example.
I
You know,
agree. I agree with what Rob's saying there. The noise. I remember when these hybrid engines first came out, and they had to design ways in which the exhaust let out more noise. Because remember watching on the TV, and when there was like heavy braking, you could actually hear the skids over the engine. If you remember, they're actually really quiet, weren't they? The new engines. I don't know if you remember, Jordan.
they were. I remember them talking about it at the time it came out, compared to the turbo. The thing is I suppose for the majority of people who watch Formula One, you only really get to watch it over a screen, and when you're watching it for your TV, you don't notice it as much. I think it's more for the atmosphere within the stadiums where it makes a difference, really, isn't it?
Well, even on sound effects on TV, I remember when watching on the TV and you hear someone heavily brake and you could hear the skidding of the tires over the engine, which says a lot, really, because those engines, particularly, I remember, and I think because they had gone from V8s, which were obviously much more powerful, very, very noisy engines, to a really quiet, brand new, state of the art hybrid V6. It's just, yeah, they've obviously made them louder. Like I said, I do think they will change the engines. I don't think they'll go electric because it just wouldn't be Formula One, because that is Formula E then. And we know road cars are going towards electric or all electric. I do think they will become more wise to how
I think more
the
towards
engine.
biofuel.
It's more
That's what I think.
yeah, more biodegradable fuel. Absolutely, I think so. And technically, if they can get to a position where they're using better quality fuel and less of it, and able to burn less of it, then the cars become lighter, they become quicker, and they become more green. So I think that's where they will go to eventually. I don't know how long they're going to stay with these on this current rule set. I'm convinced that during these new rules in terms of the car designs for next year, I believe before they change them again, there'll be a change to the engine regulations before they change. I think that'll be the next big. These regulations are designed to designs to affect the change of the car itself. The next regulations will be keeping with the current type of car, but with a different engine or different type of engine specification. Probably towards more bio, like you say, more biofuel friendly, should we say? Right. Anyway, on that note, it's been a stream for an hour and 20 minutes. Where the time goes when you're having fun. I hope everyone who has tuned in and watched, whether you're watching this back later on YouTube or whether you watched live during the stream, I hope you've all enjoyed. Won't be as long to my next video, like I said, recovering from COVID and all that sort of stuff. So, but I won't be as long for the next. But like I said, there will be changes with the channel coming up over the next sort of 6 weeks or so before we get back into testing season with the Formula One. But yeah, hope you've all enjoyed the stream. Hope you have a good evening. If you are new here, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Click the notification bell, because that way you will be notified, one, when we go live, and two, when I release pre-recorded videos, which I sometimes do. And also, if you like the video, click the like button. Cheers, Rob. Have a good Christmas, mate. And I will see you all after Christmas, probably before the new year, but certainly after Christmas. Take care.